Let's talk about Animorphs book number 8, The Alien. Our first one where we have a full narration by Aximili Escaruth Istil, the resident Andalite and pseudo-Animorph. We have had him narrate before, and that was in Megamorphs, the one we just covered. That was an unusual book, and there's quite an in-depth review. That was my previous video. But this one, we're back to the main series, we're back to the main action, we're back to assured canon. And I had fun. This is a good book. I wouldn't say it's absolutely excellent. It's not the Predator, book number 5 level of awesome. But this is a very good book and a return to form after the last two books, The Stranger and Megamorphs, which I thought were okay, but not great. This one, definite return to form. Now, there are issues with this book, so join me on an adventure as we discuss the plot, the subtle messages, of which there are a lot, and the nuance of book number 8, The Alien. So, this comes after 3 books with really high stakes. And we're talking, just forget Megamorphs for now. So books 5, 6 and 7. Book 5, we found out who Visser 1 was, turns out to be Marika's mum. Book 6, Jakes becomes a controller. Book 7, we find the Elemist. 3 hard-hitting books, really fast-paced books, and there was a lot to them. This book is a change of pace, a real change of pace. About 2/3 of this book is just Axe getting up to various forms of mischief. And it was a nice change of pace. It was just a way for Axe to develop as a character, and it's the first time for a while where we've had that, where a book has been spent mostly developing a character. And in a way, it was needed. It is, after all, his first book. He is an alien on another planet. He's sort of an outsider to the group. We needed this book. If we had another book like, say, The Message, where it was Cassie's first narration, but it wasn't really about Cassie, then this would have been a letdown. But this book does hit the mark for character development, and as we go through the plot, which we're about to do, we will find that out. So, starting off, this is the first time we have a prologue, or prologue. This was a disappointing prologue. Very disappointing, for a number of reasons. This would have been, I mean, on all faces of this, you'd think this would be a brilliant scene. The first time we're on one of these Andalite ships, we've got Prince Elfango, we've got him and Axe, and we've got the oncoming Yeerks as they're approaching Earth. You'd have thought that this would have been iconic, brilliant, and a wonderful introduction to life aboard a military vessel in the Andalite forces. And it let us down. It really let us down for a number of reasons. We start with Axe, with Prince Elfangor on the bridge. And Axe decides to project his thoughts to the whole bridge using the nickname of the commanding officer. Now remember, this is the first time he's been on the bridge. I've been on the bridge of warships many a time, and there are things you simply do not do. Now I understand that the Andalites are probably a bit different, but for a cadet's first time on the war bridge, she basically shouts out some nickname of the commander, which I imagine was partly derogatory. I don't know, it's hard to say. Old hoof and tail, I don't know. If any normal commander would be like, get off my bridge right now. Get off. I will be having a word with your commanding officer. No, the war prince just says, oh, that's cool. They can use private thought speak, can't they? Why did Axe not just privately say that to Elfangor instead of projecting it to the commanding officers on the bridge of a warship? What are they teaching him in cadet school? Anyway, that's a minor point. They're at Earth and bug fighters come out, and so they deploy their Andalite ships. Fair enough. And then Elfangor goes off. Axe says, I have to come with you. Prince Elfangor says no. Considering that Elfangor's a prince, Axe should just say, right, okay, done, and bugger off. He has a little bit of a... We have a bit of a back and forth, and then just the cringiest line. Ugh! Go burn some slugs. I mean, That's the sort of stuff you expect to see in a flunk Hollywood film. Like a B Hollywood film. Go burn some slugs. No! Firstly, these are not humans, so they wouldn't speak like humans. That's a very human sort of thing to say, don't you think? And the tone is just wrong, and it's cringe, and... But if you think this is the cringiest thing about the Andalites, then you're sadly mistaken. So while Fangor goes off, I believe that's Axe's last words to Fangor. Let's have a look. Yeah, go burn some slugs was the last thing Axe said to his brother. Wow. He should hang his head in fucking shame. Oh, pathetic. Pathetic. And that line just summed up the chapter for me. All this promise and all this hope for a brilliant chapter, and it just becomes this awful trope. Oh. And then Axe is apparently the only warrior cadet on the ship, so he's the only one in this massive dome. And have you ever thought about the impracticality of this ship? This one here. So Axe is in this bit up here, the dome. And the bridge is, according to the chapter, somewhere around the middle, probably about here. And there are your thrusters. This bit separates and floats off. And the rest of it has to turn to a fighting position. So it's like that. And that is just probably the most inefficient and impractical design for a warship. Really is. And it's easy to say that because look what happened. The dome separated and this thing decided to turn, and then the blade ship just blasted it out of the sky. It's just bang, gone. What a load of shite! What are these Andalites playing at? And before anyone says, oh, that was, you know, that they might not have had time to build all these massive ships. The war's been going on for decades. Look at the wars in the past, like World War II. The speed at which, like, the US built warships. The speed at which the British built warships in World War I. Hundreds. In the space of, what, 2 years? Hundreds of fighting capable ships. And that's 100 years ago. Andalites advanced technologically by hundreds of years above us. And they spend decades creating this shite, which is the most pathetic excuse for a warship I think I've ever read about. Utterly atrocious. Pathetic. I put a poll on my Twitter page asking people the genuine question, which race was more incompetent, the Yeerks or the Andalites? Because as much as we talk about the incompetence of the Yeerks, at least they fucking win a space fight like it's nothing. At least they do that. The Andalites are even worse. Worse than that. You got to think as well that the Yeerks were nothing. The Yeerks were just stranded on some ship. They had a few Geds. And the Andalites, in all their wisdom, managed to fuck that up. Yeah, sure, Sierra gave them technology, but then you turn around and you say, okay, right, we put borders around this planet. We make sure they don't get out. They fuck that up. What a bunch of incompetent buffoons. Makes Visser 3 look like Winston Churchill. Shit. This is why I didn't like the prologue. It just put into perspective how cringe these Andalites are. How they put across this air of competence and brilliance, but they're fucking shite. They're an absolute melt bag. I will say something though, they're very good at building the dome at the top of the ship, because this thing hurtled down to Earth without any sort of breaks from what we could tell. It was going through the atmosphere, the atmosphere was burning around the ship because it was going so fast, and it wham into the ocean, and it was fine. I remember, go back to book 4 when the Yeerks come down. It takes a couple of blasts from Dracon beams and the thing just implodes. How did this dome manage to stay in one piece? Remember as well that there's a massive red button on the side of this thing that, if compressed, opens. I know it's a kid's book, but it just goes beyond the realm of believability. So that was the prologue summed up, and I was feeling that I was in for a rough ride. But thankfully, chapters 1 through end made up for this travesty of a prologue. And that's not to say that the rest of the story doesn't have its problems. We're going to get into that. Let's talk briefly about the first 2/3 of this book. Axe is having a travesty. He's trying to fit in to human society. Not so much fit in, but learn about it. And he goes around Cassie's house to meet his family and tries chili. He goes to the cinema to watch a film and eats a lot of food. And he goes to the school and witnesses a teacher getting killed. It was fun. It was good. It was character development. And you got some brilliant lines in there. Some absolutely iconic moments in those bits. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And you got all... There were things that Axe ate that I didn't even remember. He drinks vinegar, apparently. He eats cigarette butts. I know that much. Obviously got the cinnamon buns. He went mad for chocolate in the cinema. He ate the popcorn box and didn't seem to complain about it. It's almost like he liked it. He said it was covered in grease and butter or something. But that's what we love Axe for. The insanity of this highly advanced alien just failing so miserably at playing the part of a human. We also get the mentions of numerous alien races, most of which I think we never see. We've got the Ongachik, the Hojabran, the Nahara. Do we ever see the Nahara, by the way? Because that was mentioned as the first race after the Geds that they infested. So that must have been the first planet they went to, this planet of Nahara, or whatever they were called. Right, so let's get into a few of the complaints about this part of the book. There aren't many, but they were quite sizable when they came about. There's a scene where they come out of the mall and they see a guy pulling a yerk out of his head because they've been starved of Kandrona. And Axe has an inner monologue. He thinks, I could tell them that this would happen, but then I'd have to tell them about Ciro's kindness. And I thought about that. I thought, wait, hold on. How do you get from logic point A to logic point B there? How does explaining that would happen mean that you explain Ciro's kindness? I just didn't see the logic there. There was another bit in this scene as well, which I found very, very frustrating. Jake is the leader. They've all agreed this. He didn't agree to it. The rest of him put him into this position. He gives him a hand signal to split up. We don't want people seeing us during this tense moment as a group together. What do Rachel and Cassie do? Disobey. Not only do they disobey, they actually walk up to Jake. That's just downright fucking incompetence and insubordination. You chose this guy to be your leader, and then what do you do when he gives you orders? You disobey them. Not only do you disobey, but you do the exact opposite thing that he told you to do. Foolish. I know they're kids, but god damn, is that frustrating. We're 8 books in now, plus a Megamorphs, and they're getting the most basic part of being in a hierarchical structure wrong. Jake is the leader. When he says you split up, it doesn't matter unless you're breaking some sort of legal code. It doesn't matter. You do what he tells you. It doesn't help the fact that they had no real reason to disobey him. No reason at all. They just did it. They said, well, fuck you, Jake. I'm just going to do the opposite of what you say. And why? Well, because I can. I do what I want. Shocking, 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 shocking. I think there's another bit around there as well that I think may be corrected. I was reading the original release, by the way. I haven't got the reissue of book 8, so I'm not sure if it was corrected in there. And I think it was corrected in future books. Axe says that he cannot thought speak when he's morphed as a human. This doesn't make sense on any level. I can't find any loose explanation as to why this might be the case, because it just can't be the case. He said that because humans' natural way of speaking is language, then I cannot thought speak. There's just no logic behind that. Try now to think of a reason why that would be the case, and I'll wait for them in the comments. There is no logical reason why that be the case. The Hawk-Bajir use natural language, and when they morph Hawk-Bajir later in the series, they're using thought speak all the time. There's just no. I don't know. It's frustrating. Throughout this bit, we're getting Axe going through Andalite rituals, and Tobias sees it and he's very curious about it. We get it a few times. The Andalites are a very traditional race, it seems, and I've mentioned this, I think, in the previous video. They hold their values close to them. They're very conservative, if you were to compare it to a human group, if you could call that a group. Very traditional. And there's this eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth thing going on, where Axe says, Visser 3 murdered Prince Elfangor, or my brother Elfangor, therefore I have to kill him in revenge. Now, there's a lot of philosophical discussion that can be had over that way of thinking, but this is an alien race. We can't just turn around and say, we've got the perfect solution, we've got the perfect philosophy here, we're going to put you in your place. So that's the Andalite way of doing things. But it does seem strange to me. I'm trying to think of the part that it was, but Axe was saying how Visser 3 killed Prince Elfangor while he was defenseless, and how this was an atrocity and a murder. Prince Elfangor was... Technically, he wasn't defenseless, but for all intents and purposes, yes, we'll say he was defenseless. So Axe is angry at Visser 3 for killing Elfangor while he was defenseless. Remember book 6, where Jake boiled alive a pool full of Yeerks. What did Axe say about the slaughter of defenseless Yeerks? He was overjoyed. In fact, he mocked the other Yeerk, and he was all in favour of this action. This becomes apparent throughout the rest of the series, and even this book, that the Andalites are seen as hypocrites. So it's not just me saying it now. There's actually a part in this book, I think it was Eslin, the Yeerk that we meet later on, he says that Andalites are hypocrites. And I think this is a perfect example where we see it, where Axe is all up in arms because Prince Elfangor was defenseless when he was murdered. But when it's Yeerks getting murdered, he's A-OK. All good. And that is hypocrisy. There's no two ways about it. You could say the Yeerks are very bad and the Andalites are very good. But when you set yourself a standard, if you break that standard, then you are a hypocrite. That's what hypocrites mean. That's what hypocrisy is. That's what it means. So Axe acts somewhat hypocritical here. And I'm sure this won't be the last time. There's a few things to mention about the school scene, where Axe and Jake are in the same classroom, and it's Mr. Pardew, who is their teacher. Axe and Jake sit at the back. Axe is completely hopeless at human interaction, as he always has been. That's no surprise. Mr. Pardew, just at that moment, coincidentally enough, has his Yeerk fugue, end of fugue thing. Jake decides to go to Mr. Pardew and start spouting off about, I've been through this, you're okay, you can win this fight. And Axe was absolutely right when he had his inner monologue and he said Jake's actions were dangerous and foolish. Remember, I'm always saying this, Jake is the leader, he sets the example. Most of the time, he does all right. But bits like this would inspire no confidence. No confidence at all, because that could have ended it all. He could have ended their resistance for nothing more than reassuring a controller whose Yeerk is going through the fugue state. I get it, Jake's principled. But as a leader, you have to make the cold, hard decisions, which is what we went over in book 6. And sometimes you've got to put the emotions aside and you've got to stay on track, because else you might lose everything. And Jake does not take that lesson here. which is unfortunate. Axe was right to say that he was foolish and dangerous. We then come out of the school, and Jake is immediately redeemed in my mind, because he pushes Axe up against the wall and says, right, you are not telling me stuff, because he saw the controller getting killed. And he said, you're hiding something from me, and you ought to tell me, or there are going to be some serious consequences. And I thought, finally, Jake is showing some balls. And this is not the last of that. We saw a bit of Jake's feistiness there, and his insistence that people follow his orders, follow his command. Where's this been before? Where was it when Rachel and Casey just disregarded his demands earlier on? Finally, Jake is doing something about this insubordination. I will point out as well that these Yeerks, they are incompetent. I could say that a million times. I probably have already. Why would this Yeerk voluntarily go to school when he knows, right, I'm on the verge of starvation here. I will probably lose control whilst at school. Or the one who was walking around the street. Why didn't he just stay at home where he thought, well, nobody's going to see me if I do have issues? Why doesn't this Yeerk teacher just call in sick? Easy enough. Yeah, maybe teachers union or whatever will be like, well, what's going on here? You just say, oh, sorry. They'll give you a warning, say, don't do it again. Instead, he just goes to school anyway and has this meltdown in front of the kids, putting the entire invasion in jeopardy. So stupidity on all sides at this point. But we know this already. We get the scene with Cassie's family. Now, this is just going to be a brief point. And it's an annoying one. And obviously it involves Cassie. Cassie is always the one saying we shouldn't morph any sentient creature without their consent, blah, de blah, de blah. Funnily enough, every time somebody mentions morphing human, it's always Cassie, isn't it? I think every single time it's been Cassie. And so Cassie finds Axe in a field. He says, let's come to my house. Just morph Jake. What? Cassie? You're the one who's always moaning and groaning about this stuff. And now you're just saying to Axe, oh, let's just have some fun. Morph Jake. Go on, just morph Jake. We haven't asked him if he can morph you or whatever. At least not on this occasion. Just morph Jake. I mean, we talk about Axe being a hypocrite. Look at Cassie. Is there a bigger hypocrite in Animorphs at this point? No. No, there isn't. Another scene with Axe at this stage of the book is he goes to Marco's house, meets his father. Another entertaining scene. And before he meets his father, he meddles with his computer and advances human technology to a staggering degree. My big question is, how does he know how to navigate a keyboard and a human computer system without any prior training? Yeah, maybe if he could understand what I was saying now, but then he had to read. I don't know. It just plot convenience. Just have some of that. But he messes with this keyboard, and the Animorphs come to Axe and say, "What the hell were you doing?" And then there's the whole trust thing again, and it's becoming obvious to the Animorphs that Axe is not giving them information. And as this book has progressed to this point, more and more the Animorphs have gotten frustrated, saying, why is it that we're showing you all these things and telling you all these things, but you will not reciprocate, you will not give it in return? Axe is an outsider. We've known this. He is also bound by the military and Andalite laws. Things like Ciro's kindness, which he holds himself up to, so he doesn't tell the humans things, and that means he's dividing himself from his humans, who are his only friends at this point. He is on his own on Earth if he doesn't have them. Sometimes the people you trust aren't necessarily people like yourself. They can be people that you have very little in common with. A lot of people don't have a lot in common, but have one major thing in common, and that's what the Animorphs and Axe have: their fight against the Yeerks. This whole book is about finding common ground, and Axe has to find that common ground. It's under his nose the whole time, but he's always looking at the extra details and looking at past events in the Andalite military and worrying about what's going to happen in the future if he shares this information. And worrying about his reputation among his own people. We see it a lot where he has this inner monologue where he's saying to himself, how will my people think of me if I were to take actions A, B, and C? And by the end of the story, he disregards that. So he goes to the observatory to call home because he had the idea of calling home. He has a moment where he laughs at human technology. Yeah, Axe can be a bit of a dick, and it does happen sometimes. So Tobias just sort of like, yeah, whatever. But Axe is like taking a piss out of our satellite technology, whatever. They arrive at this observatory. He gets in contact, and the strangest thing happens. He contacts a head of communications for the Andalites, Ilim or something like that, and explains that Prince Freudian slip, Prince Elfangor gave the humans, or the Animorphs, the morphing technology. And then explained that he also did that by using human technology with Andalite technology to call home. And the guy on the other end of the call are you telling me that this is Prince Elfangor? Axe says, yes. And the guy says, are you sure it was Prince Elfangor? And Axe is like, no, it was me. Because he doesn't want to harm the reputation of his brother, which is quite a touching moment. But it wasn't so much because it was his brother. It was because he didn't want to damage the reputation of his hero. It's all about reputations, this. He holds reputation to a high standard. And that can sometimes be a problem with the military way of thinking. A lot of the times, the reason why it's such a dog-eat-dog world sometimes in the military is because people are looking after themselves. They're building their own reputation, sometimes at the expense of other people. And that can be a problem. So Axe takes full responsibility for Elfangor's mistakes, or what are perceived to be his mistakes. And it was an unusual moment, because then we get a look at how the Andalites think these things through. This guy on the other end of the call is the one who's been told this information. And he just thinks, better protect the big guy. The little guy did it. And that's it's unethical for a start. This is where we start to see the black and white of Animorphs truly break apart. We've got the cracks in the last few books, and now it's starting to crumble. We get Eslin. I forget the numbers, but Eslin's a Yerk, and he finds Axe, and he says, right, I've got a deal for you. Not so much a deal, but he wants Axe to assassinate Visser 3. Why? Because apparently Visser 3 can't save anyone, and one of the people who died was his friend. I wouldn't say his lover, because I think, as we all know, when Yerks make love, they die. So I don't think they're at that stage yet. I think we can just call them good friends. This is unusual because he's admitted that Visser 3 can't save everybody. So no doubt some people are going to lose their lives. And he's going to assassinate Visser 3 for this? Is that Visser 3's fault? No. So that's just Eslin being weird. Very, very weird. But there's a strange parallel here between Eslin and Axe. Both of them want Visser 3 dead for supposedly murdering somebody very close to them. Both this Yerk and this Andalite have the same goal for the same reason. They found common ground. They found common ground. And that's where the subtle message comes full force into this book. Axe learns from Eslin. That's the feeling that I get about this book. He took this lesson from the Yerk Eslin and thought to himself, I was able to basically work with a Yerk. That's a nice rhyme. I am a poet, you know. Because we found that common ground. And he gave me information based on finding that common ground. Can I not take that concept and work with the Animorphs in a more productive and successful manner. And it was a very interesting and subtle bit. And it brought another bit of sympathy, not so much sympathy, but empathy for the position of the Yeerks. They have friends. We see this here. I mean, it didn't go into great detail about it, but these little clues are being thrown in here and there that the Yeerks aren't just these cold-hearted monsters. They have affection for one another. They have their friendships, their relationships. And sometimes they will side with the enemy to turn on their own if they feel that their own have done wrong. This is a major nuance. That's not the only nuance we get, because by the time we get to the end of the book, we find out that it was the Andalites and their incompetence that caused the Yeerk War. Because Axe explains Cero's kindness. It was not so much the incompetence of Cero, the naivety of Cero, and the incompetence then of the Andalites to fail to control the Yeerks. So this is where the black and white truly starts to collapse, and we get the grey coming through. And this is where Animorphs truly begins. Number 8, the alien. The true beginning of Animorphs. Probably hyperbole, obviously, but as we know Animorphs as this dirge of moral ambiguity, this is it here. And so this is an incredibly important book. So we're done with this scene in the observatory, very important scene, and we go back. Axe is brought into a meeting in the barn. This is another crucial scene for Jake's development, because finally, he turns around and says to Axe, enough is enough. If you don't buckle up your ideas, you're on your own. Because let's face it, he's been warned time and time again. The Animorphs have tried everything in their power to try to connect to Axe and to bring about the information they need from him. And he still hasn't. And this all happened because of Tobias. Tobias he gave a promise to Axe that he wouldn't tell the other Animorphs about the whole observatory plan. Well, how did that go? He didn't tell them, per se. He just had a bit of bloodied cloth on his talons. Now, forgive me, but I think that Tobias would have known, whilst he was flying, that he had a bit of shirt attached to him at the time. Am I crazy in thinking that Tobias would have known that he had this big bit of bloody shirt flapping in the wind behind him? Of course he would have noticed. Tobias is a sneaky little fucker. He didn't technically break the promise because he didn't tell them. He just arrived with this shirt in his hand saying, hey, look at what this... Little sneaky shit. That's not the only time, by the way. Wow, Tobias. Tobias got Axe kicked out of the group, essentially. Axe should fucking slap him around the beak. And I'm surprised he didn't. Because Axe would have looked at that, and he himself must have thought, you'd have known that shirt was there. You've done this on purpose. But he never... What a fucking idiot. And then we get the final scene. Eslin has given Axe the details of where Visither goes to feed. And so Axe goes to this area and hides as a rattlesnake. Visither comes along, Axe bites him, Visither sort of like, what the hell is that? And just before he has time to finally think, oh, hold on, kill it, bang, Axe is gone, because rattlesnakes are fast. And so Axe is gone, Visither stumbled around like, oh, fuck, and he says, Hortbajir, do your thing. And there was an annoying part, I've mentioned it in the Megamorphs review, that too many times we got the saved at the last minute trope, or saved at the last second. And it happened again here. Axe is just sort of facing down a Hortbajir while in half morph. Hortbajir comes up and then bang, Rachel comes in, saves the day at the last second. I just don't like that trope. I think it's too Hollywood, it's corny, it's cringe, and it just, my immersion goes away. The visors collapse, and Tobias is upset because he sees that the Yerk has slithered away into the water. This is where things got weird for me, for a number of reasons. So the viscer's slug, remember that slugs are blind. He's not in his Andalite body, so can't use thought speak anymore. How is he ever found? How was Visser 3 ever recovered? He would have gone downstream, ended up in a river, maybe ended up in the ocean, and he'd be fish food. Did one of the Hawk-Bajir that was running away think, shit, if I don't do something here, he's just going to slice me up. Quick run downstream and hope that the Yerk slipped out of... Oh, I don't fucking know. Comment below how you think Visser 3 recovered from that. But not only that part, they've got Alaran here in front of them. What I don't understand is they've got morphs very capable of moving Alaran's body. More than capable. They've got the bear. You've got Marco's gorilla, which can lift a truck. I'm sure Visser 3 ain't that fat. Marco could have just grabbed Alaran's body over the shoulder, and then they could have just ran a mile or so away and hidden Alaran's body. Alaran would die, but he wouldn't have been murdered, so his wish would have been granted. Visser 3 would no longer have an Andalite body, were he to ever be found, which apparently he somehow was. They just leave him there. They didn't even cover him in fucking leaves. Seriously, Jake, this is where you come in and you find this compromise. You say, right, we don't kill him here. Marco, was he in Gorilla Morph? He might have been in Wolf Morph. Probably should have been in Gorilla Morph if he wasn't. If he wasn't, Jake said, Marco, Morph, Gorilla, we're carrying this body away. And we're going to put it somewhere where if the Yerks do find it, it's going to take them a fucking long time to find it. By that point, we can have regrouped and done something about this. Fatal mistake from Jake. And that brings us to the end of the book, where Axe finally finds the common ground he needs to trust the Andalites and give them the information we need. And it was quite a beautiful ending. It's a bit like Book 6, this one. I remember what I said about Book 6, The Capture, where it was like a cake. The stuff on top was sometimes a bit wrong, a bit iffy, but the spongy centre was gorgeous. The subtle stuff maketh the book. And this book was very good. And so because it's so similar to Book 6, which I gave a 9 out of 10, I am compelled to do the same for Animorphs the Alien. It is a solid 9 out of 10. Very good book. As for Jake's leadership, we had a lot of back and forth here because he failed to spot that compromise at the end, which would have stopped Visser Alaran being infested again. So that's points against him. He did nothing when Rachel and Cassie clearly disobeyed his orders and just let it fly. However, he did show some balls, really for the first time, in saying to Axe, you will do as you're told or you're going to face some serious consequences. And because it's the first time he's really done that, I'm going to give him some bonus points for that. For this book, I'm going to give him a 6. I'm going to give him a 6. That is book number 8, The Alien. The next one we will be doing is this one. It's another Cassie book, and it's called The Secret. And I wonder what secrets we'll discover. If you haven't got this yet, you may want to get it. This is Chris Grind's adaptation of Animorphs, The Invasion. It's a stunning example of adaptation. He's done a cracking job. If you need to give someone a present for Christmas this year, I do highly recommend Animorphs the graphic novel. Let's get that bought as many times as possible. The more it gets bought, hopefully the more Animorphs stuff we get in the future. This has been the Animorphs YouTube channel. I'll see you for the next review. Ta-ra.